अस्सलाम वालेकुम डियर व्यूअर्स, वेलकम बैक टू अनदर वीडियो। डियर व्यूअर्स, आज के इस वीडियो में मैं आपके लिए लेकर आया हूँ मदर ऑफ इंग्लिश वोकैबुलरी। तो जब हम बात करते हैं किसी भी चीज़ की मदर की, तो हमारा मतलब होता है कि द बिगेस्ट एंड द ग्रेटेस्ट एग्जाम्पल ऑफ समथिंग। इस वीडियो में हम 250 एडवांस्ड वोकैबुलरी वर्ड्स के बारे में बात करेंगे, वो भी पिक्चर्स एंड एग्जाम्पल्स के साथ, ताकि हमें वो बाद में लॉन्गर पीरियड के लिए याद रह सकें। So let's move towards the category number one, emotions. So in this category, we have first picture, sorry. So how will you describe this person? इस शख्स को आप कैसे describe करेंगे? Probably angry, लेकिन हमारे पास यहाँ three most advanced alternative words हैं इस word के लिए। तो नंबर वन पर है enraged. Enraged, इसको आपने enraged pronounce नहीं करना है, okay? So Tom became enraged when the agent couldn't solve his problem. And furious, furious. He was already furious and couldn't have but yell into the phone. And finally, livid, livid. The agent's response to his problem only made him more livid. Picture number two. Oh dear, he looks sad. लेकिन सैड बड़ा ही कॉमन सा वर्ड है, हम इसके लिए एक एडवांस्ड वर्ड यूज करेंगे। तो नंबर वन पर है melancholy. Melancholy. Maria had been feeling melancholy since graduating college. Next is glum. Glum. She couldn't shake the glum feeling. Next, sorrowful. Sorrowful. She was sorrowful and felt so alone. Sight of fireworks को आप किस तरह describe करते हैं? Probably interesting. That this is an also old school word. So we have three advanced alternative words to describe the fireworks. Number one, mesmerizing. Mesmerizing. It was her first winter in her new town. The fireworks of the winter carnival were mesmerizing. Another word is captivating. Captivating. She stood there frozen in her captivating beauty. She stood there frozen in her captivating beauty. Next, spellbinding. किसी को सहरज़दा कर देना, अपने जादू में जकड़ लेना. She went home that night replying the spellbinding events of the evening in her head. Next, doesn't she look bothered? Yes, but we have the other advanced equivalent words of bothers like grumpy. Grumpy. Kim claimed she wasn't grumpy despite her obvious body language. Next, we have another alternative, crabby. Crabby, that pinches like a crab. Well, I wasn't sure if it was a lack of sleep that made her crabby or something I had done. We have another alternative, cranky. Cranky. We took a quick walk along the canal and I could see that she was no longer cranky. And next to opposite to this girl, happy. Happy. Well, but we have more better alternatives. Cheery. Cheery, not cheery, okay? Cheery. The leaves have begun to fall and a cheery mood swept in with the autumn breeze. Next, elated. Elated. Brenda was elated by the smells and the sights in the park. Next, gleeful. Do you remember the sorrowful? Just opposite to sorrowful is gleeful. The beauty of autumn made her gleeful. In the next picture, there is a boy hiding himself behind a bed, and word probably we will use to describe the boy is afraid. We have better alternative for this word. And the first one is fearful. Fearful. Jerry is very fearful of thunder during storm. Next, alarmed. Alarmed. He gets extremely alarmed and likes to hide himself behind a bed for safety. Next is rattled. Rattled. We try to calm him down, but it is so difficult when he is so rattled. And upset. Upset. We have better way to describe the word. The first is distressed. Distressed. He couldn't hide his distressed face. Next, agitated. Agitated. We all knew he was agitated. Next, unsettled. Unsettled. He just sat there feeling unsettled until the meeting was over. We have completed our first category, and in the next category we have traits that would describe the personality of people and characteristics of things. Okay, at first we have friendly. Friendly, but this is very common word, and the better words, better alternatives we have sociable. Sociable. My dad has always been a sociable guy. Next, tender. Tender. He was a tender way of dealing with people, and he makes friends wherever he is. Next, affable. Affable. He is affable and caring, and I am proud to call him Dad. What do you think how the guy feels in the picture? Boring? But boring is itself boring, but we have better alternatives. The first one is dull. Dull. And it's not that I do not like school, but it's just that it can be dull. The next alternative we have drab. Drab. We sit in class with drab textbook and listen to the uninteresting lectures. Hey, is that the case with this video also? Oh, I cannot hope so. But is it that so? You can describe in the comment box, and I wouldn't mind. Okay. Next, tedious. Tedious. I find all of it so tedious. Okay, what do you see in the picture? The dog is energetic. Energetic, we have alternatives for this word. The first one is frisky. Frisky. Kelly wanted a frisky dog, but she had no idea how much energy the dog would have. Next, lively. Lively. He is very lively and exercises daily. And next, spirited. Spirited. Luckily, Rocky's spirited attitude keeps them active. Next, this boy doesn't appear friendly. In fact, he's mean and frightens me as well. And we have bitter. Bitter. Johnny talked excitedly about going to the playground all the weeks, but he quickly turned bitter when he saw the swings were closed, unfortunately. Next, disgruntled. Disgruntled. He was disgruntled and no longer wanted to ride his bike. And next, venomous. Venomous means toxic like a snake. He yelled out venomous word as the children often do in these situations. Okay, in the next picture, we have a man looking brave, a firefighter. Arthur is a courageous man and he puts his life on the line every day he goes to work. Next, gallant. Gallant. He doesn't ask for praise, but his gallant efforts often go unnoticed. Next, daring. Daring. Nonetheless, his daring job calls him to new challenges every day. Okay, in the next picture, there is a girl being hugged. She must be lovely, but we have revered. Revered. Catherine's revered bubbly personality makes her a good friend. Catherine's revered bubbly personality makes her a good friend. Admirable. Admirable. She also listens without judgment, which is admirable. And enviable. Enviable. I think it's her enviable smile that makes me feel comfortable. In the next picture, someone is making everyone laugh. He must be funny. But we can also say amusing. Amusing. Brandon is so amusing. We can also say hilarious. Hilarious. He tells the most hilarious stories and he's full of jokes. And next, comical. Comical. He has just a comical way of speaking that makes us laugh. Okay, in the next picture there is a girl climbing the mountain and she must be adventurous. Adventurous, we can also say the bold. Bold. People also describe Jana as being bold because of her thrill-seeking ways and intrepid. Intrepid, and she is definitely intrepid, and I couldn't do even half the things she does. Next, audacious. Audacious. I saw her climbing the rock, and I hope to be audacious one day. Okay, the next word is strange. And we have the alternatives like peculiar. Peculiar. My brother had a peculiar idea of dressing up as a big bird for a cycling race. Next, bizarre. Bizarre. He showed up in a bizarre costume ready to cycle for a 50 kilometers. And we have uncanny. Uncanny. And it's that kind of uncanny thinking that sets him apart. Okay, we are done with the second category and let's move on to sensation. In this category, we have first picture tired, but you can also describe the situation as bleary eyed. Bleary eyed. Rex and Ellie went out for a morning run, but it was too early that Ellie was bleary eyed. We also have weary. Weary, and he felt weary when he walked back to his flat. And next, groggy. Groggy. Olive fell into his bed as weary as ever, while the Rex sat patiently, ready for the next adventure. Okay, no doubt this lady is hungry, but we can also say famished. Famished. Isabella was famished. She hadn't eaten anything on her 10 hours flight. And we also have peckish. Peckish. Peckish didn't begin to describe how she felt when she finally arrived at the night market. And we also have ravenous. Ravenous. Isabella knew what she wanted to eat and was ravenous by the time she bit into her tostada. Next, this man is ill, and for our ill man, we also have alternatives like nauseous. Nauseous. My aunt woke up this morning feeling nauseous. And we also have queasy. Queasy. She had a queasy feeling in her stomach and couldn't get out of bed. And we have feverish. Feverish. She felt feverish, so she lay in bed all day, allowing her body to rest. For a confused person, we can use some alternatives like befuddled. Befuddled. The new engineer was befuddled by all of the software he needed to use. And we have foggy. Foggy or blurry in mind, like, and everything he had learned in training was foggy in his mind. And we have baffled. Baffled. He hopped around from program to program, baffled by what he needed to do. Okay, dear viewers, now let's move to the category number three that belongs to the colors. So our first word is black, and black can also be described as inky. Inky from the ink. Brad noticed the sand near the volcano was inky and resembled oil. And we also have raven. Raven. He was tired from walking and lay down on the raven shore. We have onyx. Onyx. He closed his eyes and became one with the onyx landscape. And for red color, we can use the alternatives like crimson. Crimson. My mom and I love to collect crimson flowers in spring. We also have scarlet. Scarlet. She loves the scarlet hue of the petals as the sun passes through. And finally, we have ruby. Ruby. I prefer the ruby buds just before the bloom. The sky is blue, but for blue color we have alternatives like sapphire. Sapphire. We had been driving for hours when we noticed the sky had turned a beautiful sapphire above our heads. Next we have denim. Denim, and I think you must be familiar with the color of, brand of jeans, denim. And we have the example, we pulled into admire the diamond clouds. And finally, we have navy. The navy mountains in the distance looked as if they were from another planet. And white bedsheet can also be called of cream colored, of cream. There is nothing better than curling up in my cream colored blanket on a Sunday afternoon. And we have pearl, pearl. My husband knows to bring me my tea in my pearl mug. And finally we have off white, off white. He never forget to use the off white tray he bought for me in Spain. And yellow. Instead, we can say canary. Canary. I have found memories of my grandmother's house, especially the canary tablecloth she used to use. We also have amber. Amber. The walls of her kitchen were amber, scattered with beautiful artwork. And finally, we have buttery. Buttery. She never cleaned the window, so a buttery light shone through, creating an inviting atmosphere. And the color of this land of the forest is brown, probably due to the dried leaves, but instead we can say cinnamon. Cinnamon. Cinnamon leaves covered the ground like a thick carpet. We also have ochre. Ochre. The ochre trees would not show signs of life for months. And finally, we have khaki. Khaki. The khaki canopy kept the forest cool and still. And finally, the color of vegetable, green. Instead of green, we can also say emerald. Emerald. My grandfather taught me how to garden. And we also have olive. Olive. The color resembling the olive. Some of the younger sapling had olive stems. And finally, we have jade. Jade. Sometimes I would pluck a few of the beautifully colored jade leaves of kale to snack on. Okay, now let's move on to the next category of textures. Uh, from this category, we have first picture in which a girl is wearing a soft and warm winter dress. So instead, we can say downy. Downy. My daughter never goes anywhere without her stuffed rabbit. Its downy fur helps her relax. We also have velvet. Velvety. Velvety. However, it's not as velvety as it once was. And finally, silky. Silky. She likes stroking the label as it's really silky. Next in the picture, we can see the rough surface of the road. Instead of rough, we can also say rutted. Rutted. Bill and Hannah are testing to see how well their camper handles the rutted roads of the outback. And we also have bumpy. Bumpy. The bumpy terrain is going to be a challenge. And finally, pitted. Pitted. They will stay away from the most pitted areas to avoid any serious damage. And in the next picture, a girl is skating on a smooth surface of ice. Okay, for smooth, instead we can say sleek. Sleek. Alexandra wished the ice was sleeker before she began her routine. And we also say glassy. Glassy. Whenever she practiced, she ensured the rink was glassy without any imperfections. And finally, polished. Polished. Despite the ice not being as polished as she liked, she still performed well. Okay, in the next picture, we have a sharp scenery of mountains. Instead, we could say jagged. Jagged. Autumn had always dreamed of seeing the jagged yellow mountains. We also have pointed. Pointed. The pointed rocks proved challenging as he climbed to the peak. And finally, we could say bristled. Bristol. It was all worth it as he looked out over the Bristol landscape. Yes, and this is the picture of, oh, this is my favorite and mouth-watering, especially the milky, thick, and bubbly upper layer of coffee. But instead, bubbly, we can also say effervescent. Effervescent. Pedro is obsessed with coffee, especially the effervescent layer of milk on top. And we could say frothy. Frothy. Though he doesn't like all frothy drinks, he'll drink coffee all day. And finally, foamy. Foamy. There is just something about a creamy foamy that drives him crazy. Okay, our next picture is of liquid chocolate. Instead, we can say flowing. Flowing. Chef prepared his famous dessert with a flowing chocolate sauce. And we have runny. Runny. We watched in amazement as the runny chocolate covered the pastry. And finally, fluid. Fluid. The fluid river of chocolate made our mouths water, and we couldn't wait to dig in. Next, sticky. Instead, we can say gluey. Gluey. Ice cream is the perfect treat in summer, except when it melts into a gluey mess in your hand. And we have syrupy. Syrupy. You end up all syrupy, and a sweet doesn't even help. Finally, we have tacky. Tacky. I end up looking for the nearest toilet to clean up the tacky mess. In the next picture, oh, these shoes are old and worn out. Instead, you can say shabby. Shabby, David's cousin always wears these shabby red shoes everywhere he goes. We also can say threadbare. Threadbare. They are completely threadbare and don't even have laces. Finally, frayed. Frayed. He claims his frayed ones are the most comfortable pair he. Okay, our next category belongs to age and time. And this picture shows us young children. We can also say adolescent. Adolescent. It was my first year teaching adolescent children, and I was very nervous. Let me add that children between 8 and 14 years are called adolescent. Next, we can also say youthful. Youthful. One On the first day, a youthful energy filled my classroom. And finally, we have juvenile. Juvenile. Some of their behavior was a bit juvenile, but in general, they were very good. Okay, look at the next picture. Old. We can also say elderly. Elderly. My father was an elderly man before I truly got to know him. And aged. Aged. He was beginning to look aged. He was beginning to look aged, and I wanted to ask the questions I had been meaning to for many years. And finally, we could say, getting on, getting on. He was really getting on, but he answered with a youthful spirit. Okay, let's move on to the next picture. This picture is of new shoe. We can also say pristine, pristine. My brother just bought a pristine pair of shoes without a single mark on them. We also have mint. Mint. He says he's not going to wear them because he wants to keep them in mint condition. And finally, fresh. Fresh. What is the point of keeping them fresh if he's not going to use them? Next, we have a picture of a modern building, but you can also say present day. Present day. Present day architecture often leaves something to be desired. And we have current. Current. Architects create flashy designs that are current but have no real depth of longevity. And finally, we have contemporary. Contemporary. I don't think these contemporary designs will stand the test of time. Next, Oh, this man is on bicycle and he is going too fast. But you could say nimble, nimble. Dimit is a nimble delivery driver in central London. And we could say agile, agile. He is agile and never misses a delivery. And finally, swift, swift. The swift movement he makes between cars and the road looks like a dance he has choreographed. Okay, look at the next picture. Relaxed. But you can also say easygoing. Easygoing. You couldn't describe my sister as being easygoing. I swear she's always in a hurry. And we can say carefree. Carefree. However, she feels truly carefree while relaxing in a hammock on holiday. And finally, we could say unhurried. Unhurried. It is in these unhurried moments that she can truly decompress. Let's move on to the next category, weather. And in this category, in first picture, we have a rainy day that can also be described as drizzly. Drizzly. London is known for its drizzly days. We also have showery. Showery. However, a showery trip to London can be thoroughly enjoyable. And finally, we can say damp. Damp. Don't forget your umbrella on these damp days. You will regret it if you do. Next picture shows a stormy sky. Instead, we can say inclement. Inclement. It was sudden how the weather went from sunny to inclement in a matter of minutes. And we can also say raging. Raging. We had to run for cover as the raging winds began to whip around us. And finally, turbulent. Turbulent. The turbulent clouds started to twist and darken as we drove away. Next picture shows a windy way or a windy weather. We could also say blustery. Blustery. Abbey was shocked by the blustery weather. And we could also say breezy. Breezy. She was used to breezy days back home, but this seemed much more intense. And finally, gusty. Gusty. The gusty weather broke her umbrella and she ended up sitting in her hotel room for the rest of the day. Okay, in the next picture, there is a boy playing in a hot summer weather. Uh, Instead of hot, you could say blazing. Blazing. What does Christian like to do when it is blazing outside? He likes to play with the sprinklers. We also say blistering. Blistering. When the temperature is blistering, he knows that it is his time to go outside and have some fun. The blistering is more severe weather. And finally, sweltering. Sweltering. It is a great way for him to cool down on sweltering summer days. Okay, look at the next picture. It is cold. What instead we can say? Frigid. Frigid. Our neighbors seem to love the frigid temperature of winter. We can also say biting. Biting. He would put on his coat and hat and brave the biting winds. And piercing. Piercing. Piercing means pinching. It never seemed to bother him, even when the piercing temperature seemed to freeze me to my core. Okay, next picture. So, it's a beautiful day and it looks like it's warm. And what instead we could say mild. Mild. It was the first mild day of autumn. And we could also say temperate. Temperate. The temperate climate was perfect for a hike and a picnic. And finally, we can say comfy. Comfy. One could get lost roaming the hills, enjoy the comfy temperature. Next, there are a lot of clouds in the sky and the weather is cloudy. What instead we could say overcast. Overcast. It was the first They knew their trip would be cut short when they saw the overcast sky. And we can say dreary. Dreary. The dreary day made for a long drive home. And finally, we can say gloomy. Gloomy. It wasn't long before the gloomy sky turned into a full downpour. Next, we have this picture. Oh, there are no clouds, so it's clear. Instead, we can say cloudless. Cloudless. The cloudless sky seemed to stretch for miles. We could also say bright. Bright. A bright day meant the mood in town would be cheerful. And finally, sunny. Sunny. Everyone longed for sunny days. Okay, we are moving on to the new category, taste. Let's begin with this picture, sweet. Instead, we can say prickly. Prickly. Stephanie brought an amazing cake, but the icing was so trickly I couldn't eat it. We can also say sugary. Sugary, full of sugar. I love sugary foods, but this was too much. And finally, we can say sickly. Sickly. Chocolate cake is good on its own. It doesn't need anything sickly sweet added to it. Next, salty. Full of salt. What instead we can say? Brainy. Brainy. The briny air filled my nose and lungs as I set sail. We can also say brackish. Brackish. Brackish water hit my face and stung my eyes. And finally, we have saline. Saline. A saline taste was left on my lips after our day out at sea. Okay, look at this next picture. Oh, it's bitter. Somebody like it and somebody dislike. So what instead we can say harsh. Harsh. Grapefruits have a harsh taste that not everyone enjoys. And we also have astringent. Astringent. It is very astringent and wildly different from other citrus fruits like oranges and mandarins. And finally we have acrid. Acrid. It's better to add a bit sugar to get rid of the acrid flavor. Okay, next we have this picture. Okay, this juice is sour. Sour. What instead we can say? Acidic. Acidic. Nothing says occasion like a slightly acidic ice cold lemonade. We could also say sharp. Sharp. I enjoy the sharp taste of freshly squeezed lemon juice. And finally, we could say tangy. Tangy. Its tangy aroma always helps me relax. Next, we have this picture. It's ice cream. Instead, we can say rich. Rich. Every summer, mom would make the richest and most delicious ice cream sandwiches. We could also say milky. Milky. The milky homemade ice cream was out of this world. We could also say luscious. Luscious. This means more creamy, more delicious. I hope she'll make this luscious treat for me when I come to visit. Next, we have this picture. This is curry and it's spicy. Instead of spicy, we could say hot. Hot. I knew the curry would be hot when I saw the chilies sitting on top. We could also have peppery. Peppery, containing lots of pepper. I didn't realize just how peppery it would be until I took the first bite. And finally, we have fairy. Fairy. Finally, we have fiery. Fiery with blazing fire, like blazing fire. I still have memorized of that fiery dish, and despite the pain, I want to try it again. Okay, we are going to have final category appearance. And in the first picture, we have this man is a basketball player and he is tall. Tall. Instead of tall, you could say gangly. Gangly. Despite Josie's gangly build, he became a star basketball player. And we have Lanky. Lanky. He was a bit lanky and awkward as a child, but he proved himself on court. Finally, we have long-legged. Long-legged, a person with longer and longer legs. Now everyone fears that long-legged powerhouse when he has the ball. Next, we have this picture. These buildings are very high. Instead of high, we could say soaring. Soaring. I had never lived in a big city, and the soaring skyscrapers took some getting used to. We also have towering. Towering. It felt odd to look up and see these towering metal and glass structures everywhere I went. Finally, we have lofty. Lofty. We don't have these lofty buildings in the countryside. Next, we have this picture small. Two little puppy. Instead of small, but what instead we can say? We can say petite. Petite. Carla had always wanted a puppy, something petite she could take around with her. We could also have teeny. Teeny. She finally adopted Bella, a teeny poodle that was only a few weeks old. And finally, we could say wee. Wee. Now that wee dog follows her around everywhere. Okay, look at this picture. Oh, these flamingos have a long and thin legs. Instead of thin, you could say lean. Lean. They could believe the flamingos were standing right in front of them. They were lean and very elegant. The next is more nice word, scraggly. Scraggly. Their legs looked like scraggly pink twigs sticking out of the murky water. Finally, we have slim. Slim. It was almost as if it were a forest of slim bamboo with birds on the tops. Next, we have this picture. This is white, very white. Instead of white, what could you say? You could say broad. Broad. The orchestra began to set upon the broad stage in the center of the room. The orchestra began to set up on the broad stage in the center of the room. We also have spacious. Spacious. It was a spacious theater with plenty of seating. And finally, we have vast. Vast. I knew the sound would be incredible in the vast space. Okay, next look at this picture. This is a narrow lane. Instead of narrow, you could say slender. Slender. I was surprised to see so many slender alleyways. When I went to India, we also have tight. Tight. The tight spaces were only big enough for a bicycle to get through. And finally, we have cramped. Cramped. However, the cramped space meant that you could easily talk to your neighbor if you wanted to. And finally, we have cramped. Cramped. However, the cramped space meant that you could easily talk to your neighbor if you wanted to. If you wanted to. And we have next picture. Oh, this is an attractive scene. Instead of attractive, you could say alluring. Alluring. There is nothing I enjoy more than strolling through a alluring palace of Versailles. And we have enticing. Enticing. The enticing paintings and tapestries on the walls are to die for. Finally, we have glamorous. Glamorous. Don't even get me started on the glamorous candleries and statues. And quite the opposite here, these men are filthy. Instead, you could say disheveled. Disheveled. We returned from the rugby match completely disheveled and in need of shower. We also have grimy. Grimy. We left our grimy boots outside the house. And finally, we have grubby. Grubby. Mum would have been livid if we'd left her floor all grubby. And finally, we have a picture of very minimalistic room. Plain. Instead of plain, we could say ordinary. Ordinary. My dad's house is fairly ordinary. It's not too big or too small. And we also have simple. Simple. He likes to keep things simple. So he has white walls with few accessories. And finally, conventional. Conventional. It's a more conventional style, but it still feels homey. And we have another and the last picture, ugly. Oh, this fruit is not fresh, so it looks a little bit ugly. Instead, ugly, we could say unsightly. Unsightly. The most people don't choose unsightly fruit. They want ones with bright colors. You could also say unattractive. Unattractive. I actually prefer them. The more unattractive, the better for me. Finally, displeasing. Displeasing. The reason is that fewer people touch and squeeze the displeasing ones, which means they are still beautiful on the inside.
सो कॉन्ग्रेचुलेशन डियर व्यूवर्स, फाइनली हमने 250 प्लस वर्ड्स को एग्जांपल एंड कॉन्टेक्स्ट में डिस्कस कर लिया है। वीडियो काफ़ी लंबी थी, लेकिन आई होप कि ये वीडियो आपके वोकैबुलरी को इन्हेंस करने और इंग्लिश को बेहतर बनाने में काफ़ी हेल्पफुल रही होगी। आई नो कि 250 वर्ड्स को याद रखना आसान नहीं होगा, लेकिन अगर आप इस वीडियो को वक्फे से 1 या 2 दिन के वक्फे से बार बार रिपीट करके 2 या 3 बार रिपीट करके देखेंगे तो आई एम श्योर कि आपको ये वर्ड्स जो है अच्छे से याद हो जाएंगे। मैंने अपनी तरफ से पूरी कोशिश है, और अगर जाने अनजाने में वीडियो में कोई गलती हुई हो तो मुझे माफ़ कीजिएगा। तो मेहनत कीजिए, आगे बढ़िए, मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में। अल्लाह हाफ़िज़।